Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The gunmetal of the intricate lighter clicked shut, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the breathless silence of the luxury suite, signaling that the predator had finally cornered his prey. Julian Vane stood with his back pressed against the cold, floor-to-ceiling glass of the penthouse, the sprawling, neon-drenched nervous system of the city pulsating 80 floors below. There was nowhere left to run, no data stream to hide behind, no firewall to erect. In front of him, occupying the space with the suffocating gravity of a collapsing star, stood Silas Thorne. Silas didn't just walk. He stalked, closing the distance with a predatory grace that made the air in the room feel thin. He exhaled a plume of gray smoke, his eyes, dark, mocking, and infinitely dangerous, drilling into Julian's soul. "You're trembling?" Silas murmured, his voice a rough velvet baritone that vibrated through Julian's ribcage. He placed a hand on the glass beside Julian's head, boxing him in. "For a man who deals in cold, hard facts, you seem to be having trouble processing the current variable. Or is it that you've finally realized that your books and algorithms can't save you from me?" Julian swallowed hard, adjusting the rim of his glasses, a nervous tic he had never managed to purge. "I'm not trembling, Thorne. I'm calculating the probability of you doing something regrettable." "Regrettable?" Silas leaned in, the scent of expensive tobacco, leather, and rain overwhelming Julian's senses. "Darling, everything we're about to do is going to be regrettable. That's the point." To understand how Julian Vane, heir to the Vane Information Systems empire, a man known in the underworld as the Architect for his ability to dismantle companies with a keystroke, ended up pinned against a window by his family's sworn enemy, one must rewind 48 hours. It began, as most tragedies in Julian's life did, with his mother. Eleanor Vane was not a mother. She was a monarch. She sat behind her mahogany desk in a room so climate-controlled it felt like a mausoleum. Julian stood before her, clutching a tablet to his chest like a shield. He was 26 years old, a genius by all metrics, yet in this room he was a child waiting for a scolding. "The merger with the Thorne conglomerate is stalling," Eleanor said, not looking up from her documents. Her pen scratched against the paper, a harsh, rhythmic sound. "Thorne is unreasonable," Julian replied, his voice steady but deferential. "Silas Thorne doesn't want a merger. He wants a hostile takeover. He's been buying up our subsidiary debt. I've run the numbers, Mother. If we restructure the Asia division, we can hold him off." "I'm not interested in holding him off, Julian. I'm interested in owning him." Eleanor finally looked up. Her eyes were ice blue, identical to Julian's, but where his were often filled with curiosity, hers were devoid of humanity. "And to own a man like Silas, one must offer him something he cannot take by force." Julian frowned. "We have nothing he wants. He has capital, he has territory, he wants legacy. And he wants to humiliate us before he absorbs us." Eleanor interrupted. She stood up, smoothing her skirt. "I spoke with Silas's father this morning. We've come to an arrangement. A union of the two houses. A marriage." Julian felt the blood drain from his face. "Marriage? Mother, I don't have a sister. And the Thorne lineage is entirely male." Eleanor walked around the desk, stopping inches from him. She reached out, straightening his tie with a terrifying gentleness. "I know, Julian. I know you don't have a sister. Just as I know why you've never introduced a girlfriend to the family. Just as I know why your personal security detail was fired last month after you were seen entering a certain discreet establishment in the West End." The tablet slipped from Julian's fingers, landing on the thick carpet with a dull thud. His heart hammered against his ribs. It was the one secret he had guarded with his life. In the cutthroat world of corporate dynasties, any deviation from the norm was a weakness, a fracture a rival could exploit. "You knew," he whispered. "I am your mother. I know everything," she said coldly. "I didn't care as long as you were discreet. But now it is useful. Silas Thorne is." fluid in his appetites. He is bored, Julian. He is a wolf looking for a bone to chew on. I offered him you. Me? Julian choked out. You're selling me? To him? He hates me. He's despised me since prep school. He doesn't hate you. He thinks you're insignificant. He calls you the librarian, the calculator. He thinks you are a soft, spineless creature who hides behind screens, Eleanor said, her voice dripping with disdain that mirrored Silas's own. He agreed to the courtship for the amusement of it. He wants to break you. He wants to see the vain airbag. And you want me to let him? I want you to seduce him, Eleanor hissed, her grip on his tie tightening until it choked him. You will date him. You will play the submissive little scholar he thinks you are. And while he is distracted by his own arrogance, you will find the encryption key to his private ledger. You will find the dirt that buries the Thorne family forever. Do this and you can live your life however you please. Refuse, and I will disown you, strip you of your inheritance, and ensure you never work in this city again. She released him, patting his cheek. Dinner is at 8. Wear something accessible. The restaurant was called Obsidian. It was an underground cavern of black marble and gold leaf, a place where the city's monsters came to dine in privacy. Julian arrived precisely at 8. He wore a suit that was tailored to perfection, navy blue, conservative, buttoned up high. He wore his thick-rimmed glasses. He carried a tablet. He looked exactly like what he was, a highly intelligent man uncomfortable in his own skin. Silas was already there. Silas Thorne was a physical masterpiece of violence and luxury. He sprawled in the booth, taking up too much space, his jacket discarded, the top buttons of his black shirt undone to reveal the tanned skin of his throat and a hint of a silver chain. He was watching Julian approach with a lazy, predatory grin. Well, Silas drawled as Julian slid into the booth opposite him. If it isn't the nerdy Bookworm. Did you bring me a spreadsheet, Vane? Or are we going to read poetry? Julian set his jaw, placing the tablet on the table. I'm here because my mother ordered it. I assume you're here because you enjoy tormenting things you consider beneath you. Silas laughed, a dark, rich sound that turned heads 2 tables away. He reached out, his large hand covering Julian's on the table. His skin was hot, calloused. Tormenting? No. I'm here because I was curious. I wanted to see if the rumors were true. That the icy, robotic Julian Vane actually has a pulse. That somewhere under that starch and glass, there's a man. He squeezed Julian's hand, hard enough to hurt. But looking at you, I think they were wrong. You're just paper, aren't you? Dry, brittle paper. Julian pulled his hand away, adjusting his glasses. Paper cuts, Silas. You'd do well to remember that. Is that a threat? Silas's eyes danced with amusement. He poured wine into 2 glasses. Drink. You look like you're about to faint. Tell me, do you even like men? Or is this just another corporate maneuver by Mommy Dearest? Does it matter? Julian asked, taking a sip of the wine to mask the tremor in his hands. We are both pawns in a merger. Let's just get through dinner. No, Silas said sharply. The amusement vanished, replaced by a cold intensity. I am not a pawn. I am the king. You are the pawn. And I don't do fake dates. If you're going to sit at my table, Vane, you're going to entertain me. And how am I supposed to do that? Silas leaned forward. Take off the glasses. I need them to see. Liar. I've seen your medical file. You have a mild astigmatism. You wear them as a shield. Take them off. It was a command, not a request. The power dynamic rippled through the air, heavy and intoxicating. Julian hesitated. His instinct was to refuse to fight with logic and sarcasm. But he remembered his mother's ultimatum. Find the key. Seduce him. Slowly, Julian reached up and removed the frames. The world blurred slightly, the sharp edges of the restaurant softening. But Silas remained in focus, largely because he was so close. Without the glass barrier, Julian felt naked. His eyes, usually hidden, were large, framed by dark lashes, vulnerable. Silas stared at him for a long moment, the silence stretching. For the first time, the mockery in his expression faltered. His gaze dropped to Julian's lips, then back to his eyes. "Better?" Silas murmured, his voice lower. "You have beautiful eyes, Julian. It's a shame you use them only to read profit margins." "I see more than you think," Julian retorted, his voice gaining a fraction of strength. "For instance, I see that you're sitting with your back to the wall, scanning the exits every 30 seconds. You're drinking with your left hand, keeping your right free. You're not bored, Silas. You're paranoid." Silas froze. A slow, dangerous smile spread across his face. "Analysis. Very good. But you missed one variable." "Which is?" "I'm not scanning for my enemies," Silas whispered. "I'm scanning for yours." Before Julian could process the words, the air shattered. A deafening crash echoed as the front window of the restaurant exploded inward. Shards of glass sprayed like diamond shrapnel. Chaos erupted. Screams, overturning tables, the distinct thwip-thwip of suppressed automatic fire. Julian froze, his analytical mind trying to process the data, trajectory, sound, origin, but his body failed to react. He was a creature of the mind, not of action. Silas was a creature of war. In a blur of motion, Silas vaulted over the table. He didn't run away, he tackled Julian. Julian felt the air leave his lungs as 200 pounds of muscle slammed him to the floor. Silas covered him completely, shielding Julian's body with his own as bullets chewed up the upholstery of the booth, where Julian's head had been a second ago. "Stay down!" Silas roared, the playful playboy gone, replaced by a ruthless combatant. He drew a sleek black pistol from a holster at the small of his back, so that was why his jacket was off. "Who are they?" Julian shouted, pressing his face into the dusty carpet, his heart thundering like a trapped bird. "Not my guys." Silas fired 2 shots blindly over the booth, suppressing the attackers. "Move! Kitchen! Now!" He hauled Julian up by the collar of his expensive suit. They scrambled, crouched low, amidst the pandemonium. Julian's glasses were left behind on the table, crushed under a boot. The world was a blur of noise and terror. They burst into the kitchen, startling the chefs. Silas didn't hesitate. He kicked open the rear exit door, dragging Julian into the rain-slicked alleyway. "The car is around the block," Silas growled, shoving Julian against the brick wall to check him for injuries. His hands were rough, frantic. "Are you hit? Check yourself." I'm fine," Julian gasped, wiping rain and brick dust from his face. He looked at Silas. The other man was bleeding. A graze on his cheek, a tear in his shirt where a shard of glass had sliced his shoulder. "You're bleeding," Julian said, his voice shaking. "I'll live. We need to move." That was a hit squad. High level. Silas grabbed Julian's wrist. "Come on." "Wait." Julian stopped, planting his feet. His mind, finally catching up to the adrenaline, began to whir. "Stop, Silas. Think." They came through the front. The extract team would be at the back. "If we go to your car, we're walking into a trap." Silas stopped, turning back, rain plastering his dark hair to his forehead. "My car is armored. They know that. They used suppression rounds, not armor-piercing. They wanted to flush us out. The car is the kill box." Julian's eyes darted around the alley. He pointed to a rusted maintenance ladder leading up the side of the adjacent building. "Up. We go up. The skyline. We cross the roof to the metro tower. My keycard works there." Silas stared at him. The nerdy bookworm was gone. In his place was the architect, the man who saw patterns where others saw chaos. "You want me to climb a fire escape in Italian leather?" Silas asked, a ghost of a grin returning. "I want you to live," Julian snapped. "Climb." They made it to the penthouse of the metro tower, a neutral ground property owned by a shell company Julian managed, drenched, exhausted, and running on pure adrenaline. The storm raged outside, mirroring the turmoil inside the room. Silas had paced the floor for 10 minutes, making calls on a burner phone, barking orders to his security team. Julian had gone straight to the secure terminal in the wall, bypassing the locks, pulling up security feeds. It wasn't the Russians, Julian said quietly, typing rapidly. And it wasn't the triads. Silas hung up the phone and walked over, dripping water onto the pristine floor. He looked at the screen. Then who? Who has the balls to hit the vein and thorn heirs at the same time? Julian hesitated. He tapped a final key. A grainy image from a street camera appeared. It showed a black van fleeing the scene. The license plate was obscured, but there was a decal on the bumper. A small, stylized falcon. Silas went rigid. That's my father's personal security insignia. And the men, Julian whispered, zooming in on a frame of a shooter. That tactical gear. It's Vane corporate issue. Prototype weave. Only my mother has access to it. The silence that followed was heavier than the storm. They're working together, Silas said, his voice hollow. Not just on the merger. They staged the hit, Julian realized, horror dawning on him. It's a bonding exercise. Trauma bonding. They wanted to force us into a situation where we had to rely on each other to survive. To accelerate the alliance. They almost killed us, Silas snarled, his fist slamming into the wall, cracking the plaster. To seal a business deal? They fired live rounds at their own sons. We are assets to them, Silas. Not sons. Julian turned away from the screen, his shoulders slumping. The weight of his life, the manipulation, the coldness of his mother, crashed down on him. He took off his wet jacket, throwing it onto a chair. I'm just a key to a ledger. You're just a stud for a bloodline. It's all just data to them. He walked to the window, staring out at the city, feeling utterly defeated. He expected Silas to leave, to rage, to storm out. Instead, he heard the click of the lighter. And then Silas was there, pinning him against the glass. You're trembling, Silas murmured. I'm calculating the probability of you doing something regrettable, Julian replied, the dialogue bringing them back to the present moment. Regrettable? Silas leaned in. Darling, everything we're about to do is going to be regrettable. That's the point. Silas didn't strike him. He didn't mock him. He reached out and touched Julian's face, his thumb tracing the line of Julian's jaw. The touch was electric, burning through the chill of the rain-soaked clothes. You saved my life back in the alley, Silas said softly. The bookworm has teeth. I just analyzed the situation, Julian stammered, his breath hitching as Silas pressed his body flush against his. The heat was overwhelming. You took command. I like that. Silas's eyes dropped to Julian's lips. You know, your mother told me you were queer. She thought she was giving me a dirty secret. Leverage. Julian flinched. She told you? She did. She thought I would be disgusted. Or that I would use it to shame you. Silas moved his hand to the back of Julian's neck, his fingers tangling in the damp hair. She didn't do her research. She doesn't know that I've wanted to break that composure of yours since the day we met at the shareholders' gala 5 years ago. I didn't call you a nerdy bookworm because I despised you, Julian. I did it because I wanted your attention. I wanted you to look up from your damn books and see me. Julian's eyes widened. You were pulling my pigtails. Essentially, though with higher stakes. Silas smirked, but his eyes were intense, vulnerable. We are two sides of the same coin, Julian. Chaos and order. They want to use us. They want to manipulate us into a merger. Silas leaned down, his lips brushing against Julian's ear. Let's give them a merger. But not the one they planned. What are you proposing? Julian breathed, his hands instinctively clutching the lapels of Silas's shirt. An alliance. A real one. You have the brains to dismantle their operations from the inside. I have the muscle to take their territories. We stop being sons. We become the kings they're so afraid of. Silas pulled back to look him in the eye. But first, I need to know if the architect can handle the chaos. Julian looked at the man who had been his tormentor, his rival, and now his partner in survival. He saw the hunger in Silas's eyes, a hunger that matched the loneliness in his own soul. For the first time in his life, Julian didn't want to analyze the outcome. He wanted to experience the variable. Julian reached up, grabbing Silas by the tie and yanking him down. "Stop talking, Thorn, and prove you're not just a brute." Silas growled low in his throat and crashed his mouth onto Julian's. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a collision. It was years of rivalry, repressed tension, and adrenaline pouring into a single act. Silas kissed like he fought, relentlessly claiming territory. He bit at Julian's lower lip, forcing his mouth open, his tongue sweeping in to taste him. Julian groaned, his back arching against the cold glass. He wasn't passive. He met Silas's fire with his own ice, his hands roaming over Silas's broad shoulders, feeling the tension in the muscles. He realized with a jolt that he wasn't afraid. He felt powerful. He was the only one who could handle this man. Silas broke the kiss, gasping, burying his face in the crook of Julian's neck. He bit down on the sensitive skin there, making Julian cry out, half in pain, half in pleasure. "You're mine now," Silas whispered against his skin. "No more mother, no more father, just us. We burn it all down." "Burn it," Julian agreed, tilting his head back to give Silas better access. "But we do it my way. Calculated. Precise." Silas laughed against his throat, a vibration that went straight to Julian's groin. He lifted Julian up, wrapping Julian's legs around his waist, carrying him away from the window and toward the sprawling bed in the center of the room. "Your way for the business," Silas growled, throwing Julian onto the mattress and crawling over him like a dark shadow. "My way for this." As Silas stripped off his shirt, revealing a torso scarred by battles and defined by power, Julian reached up to pull him down. The glasses were gone. The data was irrelevant. The nerdy bookworm had found his story, and the villain was about to become his hero. The next morning, the sun broke over the city, gleaming off the glass towers of the financial district. The boardroom of Vane Information Systems was tense. Eleanor Vane sat at the head of the table. Opposite her sat Reginald Thorne, Silas's father. They were waiting. The doors swung open. Silas walked in first. He wore a fresh suit, sharp, black, impeccable. He looked rested, dangerous. He didn't sit in the chair designated for him. He walked to the window and leaned against it, crossing his arms. Then Julian entered. He wasn't wearing his glasses. He walked with a new cadence, confident, fluid. He carried a single tablet. "Mother, Mr. Thorne," Julian said, his voice calm but carrying a steel that hadn't been there before. He placed the tablet in the center of the table. "You're late," Eleanor snapped. "Well, did you secure the agreement?" "We did," Julian said. He tapped the screen. The wall monitors flickered to life. They displayed a series of documents. Not merger papers. They were offshore account ledgers. Illegal arms deals sanctioned by Reginald Thorne. Insider trading records authorized by Eleanor Vane. The evidence of the hit squad hired the previous night. Eleanor stood up, her face pale. "What is this?" "This," Silas said from the window, his voice a low rumble, "is a hostile takeover. But not of the companies," Julian added, resting his hands on the table, leaning in toward his mother. "Of the leadership. You both are stepping down. Effective immediately. The board has already received these files. If you sign the resignation letters, the files stay encrypted. If you don't, they go to the feds in 5 minutes. You wouldn't dare," Reginald sputtered. "You're my son." "I am," Silas smiled, walking over to stand behind Julian. He placed a possessive hand on Julian's shoulder, his fingers digging into the fabric of the suit. "And he is your downfall. You shouldn't have put the wolf and the architect in the same cage. We figured out how to pick the lock." Eleanor looked from Silas to Julian. She saw the hand on the shoulder. She saw the look in Julian's eyes. No longer a child seeking approval, but a man who had conquered his demons. You're sleeping with him, she whispered. I'm dating him, Julian corrected, covering Silas's hand with his own. And unfortunately for you, mother, he likes nerds. Julian tapped the tablet one last time. The resignation letters printed out on the table. Sign, Julian commanded. As the old monarchs picked up their pens with trembling hands, Silas leaned down and whispered in Julian's ear, loud enough for the room to hear. Told you I'd leave you breathless. And that is how the viper tamed the wolf, or perhaps how the wolf finally found a mate worth hunting. If you enjoyed seeing Julian finally take control and bring the empire to its knees, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, would you forgive a husband who tried to kill you just to test your bond? Or would you take the company and run? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then,